Pack your things, you're done here. The boss's cold voice cut through the office like ice. I froze, clutching the contract I'd just signed for my new house. Just yesterday, everything seemed normal, answering emails, chatting with colleagues about weekend plans, laughing softly at a graduation party invite. Yet here I was, dismissed, all because I refused to flatter him. My heart was steady, no panic, just a quiet question. What now? By the way, before we dive in, tell me in the comments. Ever seen someone get the revenge they really deserved? I read all of them. Hey, while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's continue. My name is Sloan, 32 years old, a project coordinator at a medium-sized company. Life was steady, if a bit routine, workdays full of emails, meetings, and the small joys of family life at home with my husband Oren and our little daughter Zadie. Just after buying my first house, a step I'd been saving for years, I thought things were finally falling into place. Managing the mortgage and bills was daunting, but I was determined to make it work. I never expected the ground beneath me would start to shift so quietly, then so suddenly. The first warning signs were subtle, almost easy to dismiss if I hadn't been paying close attention. The boss, once a man who greeted me with a nod and occasional smile, had grown distant. His eyes barely met mine in meetings, his tone was clipped, less patient. One day, during a team check-in, he remarked, "You need to be more enthusiastic. Show some loyalty, it counts here." His words stung not for what they said but for what they implied. I stayed silent, refusing to play the game he wanted. Around the office I noticed the others changing too. Colleagues who used to chat casually now fawned over him, laughing a little too loudly, agreeing with everything he said. I was different. I'd never been one to flatter for favors. I believed my work should speak for itself. Then came Blythe, my closest coworker. She slipped me a note one afternoon during a break. "Be careful, heard he's upset about you. Something you said in last month's report didn't sit well." I folded it quickly, my heart steady but uneasy. I didn't panic, but I began watching more closely. At home that evening, Oren noticed the shift in me. "You're quieter than usual," he said gently as we prepared dinner. I shrugged, trying to appear normal. Zadie, our daughter, laughed as she played on the floor, oblivious to the tension creeping into the air. "I think the boss is upset because I won't flatter him," I confessed, more to myself than to Oren. He frowned, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to change who you are, Sloan. We'll figure this out." Determined not to be caught off guard, I started gathering details. I saved every email, printed reports, and kept a daily journal of unusual incidents. Changes in attitude, strange meetings, offhand remarks. I wasn't angry or desperate, I was focused. The calm before the storm. One afternoon, I overheard a hushed conversation in the break room. Two coworkers whispered about a reshuffle coming, how some troublemakers might not last long. I stiffened. Was I one of them? Zadie, sensing my unease, tried to cheer me up with a drawing she made at daycare. "My mommy is the best," it said in her uneven handwriting. I smiled, grateful for the reminder that my worth wasn't tied to office politics. I talked quietly with a few trusted colleagues, testing the waters. Some shared their own worries, uncertainty about the company's future, rumors of cutbacks. But none dared speak openly about the boss's growing frustration with me. I realized I was isolated but not alone. One evening, while folding laundry, I told Oren about a meeting where the boss openly criticized my recent project, not for its quality, but because I hadn't shown enough support. It was a vague accusation, impossible to prove wrong, but damaging in its intent. "Maybe it's time to look for new opportunities," Oren suggested carefully. I shook my head. "Not yet. I want to be ready if they try to push me out. I won't give them the satisfaction." In quiet moments, I researched ways to protect myself, financial advice, stories of others who faced similar situations. I tightened my budget, making sure I could handle a few months without a steady paycheck. The weight of the house mortgage pressed on me, but I pushed fear down, replaced it with plans. The day before I was fired, I felt a strange calm. I had prepared in silence, gathering every piece I might need. I even began jotting down ideas for a small business, something I could start if I had to walk away from the company that had once felt like home. That night, as Zadie slept, I stared at the contract for my house. The walls I'd dreamed of decorating felt heavier now, burdened with uncertainty, but my mind was clear. I wasn't broken or defeated, I was ready. Whatever came next, I would face it on my terms. The morning started like any other. I arrived at the office just as the sun filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty desks. A few colleagues greeted me quietly, but I sensed a strange tension hanging in the air, like a storm waiting to break. I brushed it off, telling myself to focus on my tasks. After all, I had spent weeks preparing silently for anything. Then, around mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a message from the HR department. "Please come to the office manager's room immediately." The words felt heavy in my hand. I took a deep breath and walked over, each step measured, my heart steady. Panic had no place here. When I entered the room, the boss was already there, his expression unreadable. A couple of HR staff sat stiffly beside him. No smiles, no pleasantries, just the cold, hard truth waiting to be spoken. "Sloan," he began, voice flat and distant, "we've decided to end your contract, effective immediately." I blinked once, then twice. The room seemed to narrow around me. "May I ask why?" I said calmly, my voice steady but firm. The boss shrugged, as if the answer was obvious. "You don't fit the team culture. You've been distant, uncooperative, and frankly, not loyal enough." Loyalty, that word echoed in my mind. I remembered the subtle demands to flatter him, the expectation that I'd bend my principles. I said nothing, only nodded slowly. One of the HR staff handed me a folder, termination papers, final paycheck details, and a non-disclosure agreement. I took it, eyes scanning the fine print. The paperwork was standard, but the timing and tone made it clear this wasn't just about policy. Outside the door, I heard whispers. A colleague passing by stopped briefly. Blythe, my coworker, gave me a quick, sad look but said nothing. Another friend, Greer, lingered by the elevator, her eyes wide with surprise but silent. "I'll gather my things," I said softly, then turned away. Back at my desk, I packed methodically. Every file, every notebook, every personal item slid into my bag with deliberate care. No mess, no signs of chaos, just quiet acceptance. I caught the eye of a few coworkers. Some avoided me, others offered a glance of sympathy. My phone vibrated again. A message from Oren, "How are you?" I typed back, "It happened, I'm okay." I wasn't crying, I wasn't panicked. Inside, a strange calm had settled like the eye of a storm. The uncertainty was there, but I wasn't letting it control me. As I left the building for the last time, the familiar buzz of the office faded behind me. I inhaled deeply, the outside air cool and fresh. A few steps away, a street vendor called out, "Miss, want some fruit?" I smiled faintly. Life was still happening, people still moved, cars still honked, children laughed in nearby parks. That night at home, I didn't collapse into despair. Instead, I sat with Oren and Zadie, the small family bubble grounding me. "It's just a job," I said, more to convince myself than them. Oren nodded, squeezing my hand. Zadie babbled happily, her innocence a balm to my spirit. In the days that followed, the reality of unemployment sank in. Friends reached out with words of encouragement, offers to help look for new work. I returned a few calls but kept most thoughts private. I wasn't ready to broadcast my vulnerability. I reviewed my savings, recalculated budgets. The house payment loomed, but I'd tightened our finances before. I had a cushion enough for now. Though I'd lost my job, I hadn't lost control. The weeks of quiet preparation had given me tools, a clear head, a steady heart, and plans for what to do next. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the boss's words, "Not loyal enough." I realized loyalty shouldn't mean sacrificing self-respect. I'd stood firm and that mattered. The company's walls felt like a distant memory now, replaced by an open horizon. I wasn't defeated. I was ready to step forward. The days after my dismissal blurred into a rhythm of quiet resilience. I woke early each morning, not out of obligation but purpose. The house felt different, no longer just a roof over my head, but a fortress I needed to protect. I was determined not to let fear or bitterness define this chapter of my life. I spent the first few days reviewing everything, the emails, meeting notes, project reports, anything that could piece together the story of my time at the company. Not to seek revenge, but to understand what had really happened and to prepare for whatever came next. The more I looked, the clearer it became. The boss's dissatisfaction wasn't about my performance. My projects had always met deadlines and received positive feedback from clients. No, it was about something else. My refusal to conform to his expectations, to join the endless dance of flattery and favoritism that permeated the office culture. I made a point to document all these reflections in a journal. Each entry was a way to process and a record to keep, not just for others but for myself. "I am more than this," I wrote on one page. "My work is real. My values are real." While I sifted through papers and memories, Oren became my anchor. He didn't offer hollow comfort or empty optimism. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves, helping me create a new budget to stretch our savings, researching potential part-time work, and even looking into business ideas I'd mentioned in passing. One evening, as we sat on the worn couch, Zadie asleep nearby, Oren said, "You're stronger than you know. You'll find a way, Sloan, I believe in you." His faith lit a spark inside me. I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. My family was with me, and that made all the difference. I also reached out to a few former colleagues I trusted. Some responded cautiously, others with warmth and surprise. To my relief, Blythe was among those who stayed in touch. Over coffee one afternoon, she confided, "The boss's behavior was worsening long before they fired you. I was worried for you. You didn't deserve this." Her words reminded me how isolating those last weeks had been. The office politics had created walls between people, but our small alliance offered hope. We started exchanging notes about job openings, potential projects, and contacts outside the company. One day, as I sorted through a box of old files, an idea struck me. The company's financial health had been shaky for months, whispers of unpaid bills and delayed deliveries floating around the office like ghosts. What if I could turn that knowledge into an opportunity? I began quietly researching what would happen if the company went bankrupt. Liquidation, asset sales, creditor meetings. I learned about the processes, the players, and the risks. The more I found out, the more I saw a chance to reclaim some power. I drafted a plan to save and prepare funds to bid on the company's liquidated assets if the worst came to pass. It was a risky move, but it felt like a way to rewrite my story, not as a victim, but as someone who took control. Every evening, I'd pore over numbers, market values, and potential buyers. I talked with friends who ran small businesses, seeking advice on evaluating assets and managing a company. Their insights were invaluable, giving me confidence and practical knowledge. Oren often watched me, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief at my determination. "You're planning a comeback, aren't you?" he asked one night. I smiled tiredly. "Maybe. If the chance comes, I won't let it slip." Meanwhile, I also took care of the daily realities. I cleaned the house with renewed focus, cooked meals that nourished both body and spirit, and made time to play with Zadie, reminding myself of what truly mattered. I found solace in the small victories, a promising lead on a freelance project, a positive message from an old client, a quiet evening where I felt peace instead of worry. Slowly, the weight of being fired lifted, replaced by a cautious but growing sense of empowerment. No longer was I the employee who had to flatter a boss to survive. I was Sloan, the woman who faced adversity head-on, who prepared in silence, who was ready to take the next step on her own terms. Months passed, and the company's troubles became impossible to ignore. Rumors spread like wildfire, unpaid suppliers, mounting debts, and whispers of bankruptcy filling the hallways. I watched from the sidelines, my quiet preparations transforming into a plan I was ready to act on. One afternoon, as I browsed through a local business bulletin, I noticed an official announcement. The company was entering liquidation. My heart pounded. This was the moment I'd anticipated. I immediately reached out to Blythe and a few others who still kept in touch. "It's happening," I told her over the phone, my voice steady but urgent. "The company's assets will be sold off. I'm preparing to bid on some of them." Blythe's surprise was palpable. "Are you serious? That's bold." "Maybe, but it's my chance," I said. With renewed focus, I began gathering more detailed information on the assets up for sale, office equipment, inventory, even intellectual property like client databases and software licenses. Each piece was a puzzle in my plan to rebuild step by step. Then came the confrontation. One morning, out of the blue, the former boss contacted me. His tone was different, less sharp, almost hesitant. "Sloan, I hear you're trying to buy some of the company's assets," he said over the phone. I paused, then replied calmly, "Yes, I want to make sure they go to someone who can use them well." There was a long silence on the other end before he scoffed. "You think you can just walk back into the industry after how you left? You were a problem then, and you'll be one now." I smiled to myself. I wasn't the problem was the company's leadership. But I'm not here to dwell on the past. Our conversation ended with a final jab. "Good luck, you'll need it." The call left me energized rather than shaken. His disbelief fueled my determination. I shared the news with Oren later that evening. "He called, tried to intimidate me," I said. Oren shook his head, proud. "He's afraid you've already won in your own way." Meanwhile, I focused on assembling the funds and paperwork necessary to bid. I connected with former colleagues, friends in business, and even family members willing to lend support. The community I'd nurtured in the shadows was now my backbone. In preparation, I visited the company's old premises. The building felt empty, echoing memories of better days. Boxes stacked in corners, dusty chairs, and silent computers told the story of decline. Walking through, I felt a strange mix of nostalgia and resolve. This wasn't just about assets, it was about reclaiming what was lost on my own terms. The bidding day arrived. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, heart steady. I submitted my offer quietly but confidently, knowing it was fair and backed by solid planning. A week later, the news came. My bid was accepted. I was now the owner of a significant portion of the company's liquidated assets. The victory was quiet but profound. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming control, about proving to myself and others that integrity and perseverance could prevail. Word spread quickly. The former boss, now a ghost of his former power, tried to discredit me. Rumors circulated, questioning my capability and intentions. But I stayed focused, working hard to turn those assets into opportunities. I reached out to potential clients, rebuilt networks, and began the slow but steady climb toward a new beginning. One afternoon, Blythe visited me at my new small office. She looked around, impressed. "You really did it, Sloan." I smiled, feeling the weight of the journey lift a little. It's just the start. That evening, as Oren and Zadie gathered around the dinner table, I felt a deep sense of peace. The past was behind me, the future open and waiting. The confrontation had been fierce, but I had emerged stronger, not because I fought fire with fire, but because I stood firm in who I was. Owning a piece of my former company's broken empire felt surreal at first. The liquidated assets, desks, computers, contracts, even some inventory were just things. But to me, they represented a fresh start, a way to transform loss into opportunity. The first weeks were a whirlwind. My mornings began with calls to former clients, suppliers, and potential partners. Some remembered me fondly. Others were skeptical. "Is this really Sloan?" a voice on the other end once asked. I answered with quiet confidence, "Yes, and I'm ready to work." Oren was my constant companion through it all. He helped me organize deliveries, clean and refurbish equipment, and sort paperwork. "You've got this," he said one morning as we unpacked a box of office supplies. "I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling the weight of his belief. With Zadie at daycare, the house felt quieter but filled with the promise of growth. One day, a surprise call came from a longtime client of the old company. "Sloan, I heard you're back in business," he said cautiously. "We're interested in continuing our partnership, if you're ready." I paused, then replied firmly, "Absolutely, let's schedule a meeting." That meeting was a turning point. Sitting across the table, I laid out my vision. Reliable service, transparent communication, and a fresh approach that valued integrity over politics. The client listened, then nodded slowly. "We like this. Let's start small and see where it goes." Small steps became steady progress. I signed contracts for new projects, re-established supply chains, and began building a team. Some former colleagues joined me, eager for a healthier work environment, free from the toxic culture I'd left behind. But the journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments of doubt, delayed payments, unexpected expenses, the constant pressure of balancing home and work. Once, a supplier threatened to cancel a deal due to my limited credit history. I took a deep breath, negotiated new terms, and found a solution. It was a reminder that resilience wasn't about avoiding problems but facing them head-on. As the business grew, so did my confidence. The quiet woman who had been fired for refusing to flatter her boss was now leading a team, making decisions, and shaping her own path. One evening, after a long day, I sat with Oren and Zadie on our small balcony. The city lights flickered around us, a soft breeze carrying the sounds of life. "You've changed so much," Oren said softly. I looked at him, then at Zadie sleeping peacefully in his arms. I had to. Losing the job was painful, but it forced me to see what I'm truly capable of. Oren smiled, squeezing my hand. "You inspire me." That night, I reflected on how far I'd come. The fear that had once gripped me after being fired had been replaced by a quiet strength. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. At work, my new team noticed the difference too. We celebrated small wins, landing a big client, completing a tough project ahead of schedule, with laughter and gratitude. The atmosphere was lighter, filled with respect and shared goals. Colleagues who had once kept their distance now reached out, curious or hopeful. I welcomed their interest but stayed true to my values: no more bending or flattering, just honest work. The former boss faded into the background, a reminder of what I had escaped. Occasionally, I heard through the grapevine that his influence was waning, his reputation damaged by poor decisions and the company's collapse. In those moments, I felt no triumphalism, only relief. I had stepped away from toxicity and built something better. I also began planning for the future beyond business. Saving more for Zadie's education, exploring community projects, and thinking about ways to help others facing similar challenges. One afternoon, Zadie tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, tell me a story about when you were brave." I smiled, kneeling to her level. "It's a story about standing up for yourself even when it's hard." Her eyes sparkled. "I want to be brave too." "You will be," I promised. "And I'll always be here to help." Life was no longer just about surviving the past but building a future full of hope and possibility. Months stretched into a year, and the tide had truly turned. The company that had once been my cage was now a fading shadow. Its bankruptcy was complete. The creditors had taken control, assets sold off, and what remained was a shell haunted by poor leadership and lost trust. I heard through the grapevine that the former boss's position crumbled along with the company. Stories trickled in, clients pulling contracts, partners walking away, former colleagues distancing themselves. His reputation, once built on authority and intimidation, was now tainted by failure and isolation. One afternoon, I met Blythe for lunch at a small cafe near the city center. As we sipped our tea, she leaned in with a whisper, "Sloan, did you hear? The boss got fired too. No one wants to work with him anymore." I nodded, a quiet satisfaction settling in. "Sometimes people get what they deserve," I said softly, "but I don't focus on that anymore." Blythe smiled, admiring the calm in my voice. "You've changed so much, you're like a different person." Her words warmed me. I had changed, not just because of what happened, but because of how I chose to respond. I was stronger, more grounded, and more aware of what I truly valued. At work, my small company continued to grow steadily. The clients I won over stayed loyal, trusting the integrity and care we put into every project. I built a team that shared my vision, people who valued respect and honesty over shortcuts or politics. One day, a longtime colleague from my former company stopped by my office. "Sloan, I want to apologize," he said quietly. "We all saw how things were going, but no one spoke up. You deserved better." I shook his hand, feeling a mix of sadness and understanding. "Thank you. What matters is that we move forward." Outside of work, relationships shifted too. Friends who had distanced themselves in the past reached out again, drawn by the change in me and the new energy around my life. I welcomed some with open arms and kept boundaries with others who still held onto old resentments. Oren and Zadie were my rock throughout. We celebrated milestones, Zadie's first day of school, our second wedding anniversary, with joy and gratitude. The challenges we faced had only deepened our bond. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Zadie asked, "Mommy, what made you so brave?" I looked at Oren, then at our daughter. Sometimes, bravery isn't about fighting loudly. It's about standing firm even when it's scary. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. Oren nodded, squeezing my hand. "You showed us all how to do that." In the quiet moments, I reflected on the journey. The loss of my job had been a sharp blow, but it forced me to reassess what mattered. The toxic environment I left behind no longer had power over me. I'd built something new, something better. Financially, the house no longer felt like a burden but a home. The mortgage payments were manageable, thanks to careful budgeting and new income streams. I even started saving for Zadie's future, education, opportunities, dreams. The lessons I'd learned were clear. Loyalty to oneself is priceless. Integrity can't be compromised without cost, and sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a new beginning. As I walked through the city one afternoon, passing the old office building now empty and silent, I felt no bitterness. Instead, I carried peace. Life had shifted, relationships had changed, but the core of who I was remained intact, stronger, wiser, ready for whatever came next. The years that followed unfolded with a quiet grace. The shadows of the past, the betrayal, the firing, the collapse of my former company, had faded into the background like a distant storm now past. I had built a new life from the pieces, one filled with confidence, independence, and a deep sense of purpose. Our home, once a source of anxiety with its looming mortgage and unknowns, had become a sanctuary. I painted the walls soft colors, hung pictures of our family adventures, and filled the rooms with laughter, Zadie's laughter, the sound that made every challenge worthwhile. Work had transformed from a battlefield into a space of creativity and collaboration. My small business grew steadily, guided by values I held dear: honesty, respect, and a commitment to quality. Every contract signed, every client satisfied was a testament to resilience, not just mine but of the people around me who believed in this vision. One evening, after putting Zadie to bed, Oren and I sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You turned everything around." I smiled, leaning into him. It wasn't easy, but I learned that strength isn't just about fighting. It's about staying true even when the world pushes back. Zadie's footsteps echoed down the hall. She appeared in the doorway, eyes bright. "Mommy, can you tell me a story about when you were brave again?" I laughed gently. "Of course, but this time the story is about how you're brave every day too." Her grin was infectious. "I want to be like you when I grow up." "You already are," I told her. In those moments, I saw the real victory, not in business deals or legal battles, but in the quiet confidence growing inside my daughter and in myself. Looking back, I realized the firing was not the end, but the beginning of something better. It forced me to confront who I was and what I wanted. It pushed me to build a life where I didn't have to compromise my values or depend on someone else's approval. I often shared my story with close friends and new acquaintances, not as a tale of victimhood but as one of hope. It's okay to face setbacks, I would say, but don't let them define you. Use them to find your true strength. That message resonated, especially with women navigating difficult workplaces or uncertain futures. I even started volunteering at a community center, offering mentorship to those who felt stuck or powerless. The future stretched out like an open road, full of promise and possibility. I had plans, not just for business growth but for family adventures, learning new skills and deepening connections. Sometimes I thought about my former boss, but those thoughts held no anger, only a quiet sadness. He had chosen a path that led to ruin while I chose one of integrity and resilience, and that made all the difference. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a profound peace. Life had tested me, but it had also shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more whole. The past was behind me. The future was mine to create. And with each new day, I stepped forward with courage, hope, and an open heart.